Welcome to the Soul Science Nutrition Podcast, where you'll discover that when it comes to your health, you're so much more powerful than you've been led to believe. And now, your host. She's a holistic nutrition and lifestyle coach, chef, author, and yogi, Christine Okezie.
Hello, and welcome to the Soul Science Nutrition Podcast. I'm Christine Okezie. Thanks so much for listening today. So the basis of vibrational healing is a view of the human body as a dynamic energy system, and that stress, consciousness, and the beliefs we have about life all play key roles in our health and well-being. Ancient approaches to healing view the body and mind from the perspective of the body's life force energy. It sees illness, unwanted physical symptom, behavioral or psychological challenges as the result of chronic dysfunctional emotional or subtle energy patterns. Today's special guest is a well-established expert in vibrational healing who's made it her mission in life to teaching people how consciousness and the human soul itself are critical to creating the health and happiness we desire. She's Dr. Alison J.K., Ph.D., an award-winning #1 international best-selling author and the founder of the Vibrational Upgrade System. Dr. Alison is considered one of the leading experts in the field of new thought, subtle energy, energy medicine, and the human potential field. With over 20 years teaching yoga, meditation, energy medicine, with a specialized focus on the chakra system, Dr. Alison brings a unique perspective that facilitates dramatic personal transformation. Her holistic approach brings together the best of Eastern healing wisdom, intertwining her yoga, meditation, and mindfulness background with her energy medicine training into a system that's designed for lasting behavioral change. I can't wait for you to listen in on this thought-provoking conversation. And if you like the show, I'd be grateful if you could leave a rating and review. And if you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please do so. It helps me keep these empowering messages growing in the world. Thanks so much and enjoy the episode. Hello, Alison, and welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you here today.
Hi, Christine. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just want to dive in. When did you first become so passionate about energy medicine and natural healing?
I almost want to just say, dude, I've always been passionate.
You came into it, right?
Yeah. As a core aspect to being me is passionate. And if I look back in this moment, I just had a reflection. If I'm not passionate about what I'm doing, I'm not doing it.
Indeed. That's so great. Yeah. Yeah. So what was your path?
So the short of it is that I grew up going outside in nature with my older brother and really feeling like as he tromped on the dead wood in front of me, I was connecting with now notice it was dead wood. I didn't say he'd break live trees, but I would be like connecting in with all the elementals. What I came to learn later, the name for them were elementals and just this sense of being totally connected to everything and not having any sense of separation or just like all of life was there alive and I'm a part of it. And so then that became as a teen, I got to write I chose to write in a journal. I have a trunk full of them now where I started to cultivate my connection even more so, particularly with my own higher self and guidance. And so my mom, who's highly intuitive, I think I was like 17 or something, maybe younger, I don't know. She said to me, Alison, you have such a great sense of people naturally. You should consider going into psychology. And that felt right. So I did. But the third semester in, I was horrified because I was like, you're not teaching me anything about how to be the most thriving version of myself and the happiest, joyous version of ourselves. It was busy trying to prove itself as a hard science. It was all about like the hardwiring and industrial use of and capitalistic use of psychological understandings. And so, it wasn't helpful. And so from there on in, I've been asking that question, basically, I guess you could say, while living my life. And so fast forward, I've moved to San Francisco off the East Coast, and I became a political consultant out of some synchronicities, but I had moved there to go for my master's rather in creative writing, which was ultimately English lit, and creative writing was I ended up studying humans and society as my major through an art form. So when I got to San Francisco, synchronicities happened. I wrote the stories instead of taking the GREs to get in. Waited to hear from them, and ultimately ended up as a political consultant, and it hit my stride immediately, had loads of success, moved on up really quickly in the organization I was with, so that they placed me in these pretty intense campaigns. So I had some stress because I was so successful. They used that capacity of mine and threw me into like the most intense race in the state. And so I was walking through a bookstore and I had a book fall off the shelf right in front of my feet.
Oh, wow.
On meditation. And so I just started meditating and pretty soon thereafter began teaching because it was such a natural fit for me.
Okay.
So now fast forward, so the campaign season at that time was over with successful outcomes. I helped get the first Latina woman elected to the California State Assembly. She saved the last patch of green space in LA Basin.
Amazing.
So, great stuff. Yeah. So I ended up going for my master's in public administration with a focus on environmental policy to protect the environment. Got out. As I was graduating, though, I picked up my first modality, which was Usui Reiki in energy medicine. So I was teaching adults at the Community Education Center meditation alongside my master's, and I was also a naturalist interpreter for the Audubon Society, taking people out on boat tours out in Tampa Bay to this nesting site that migratory birds came down to.
Beautiful.
And it was this really cool boat because it was so shallow, designed for Tampa Bay, but the dolphins loved the sound of it, that they would come up and play. So I'm still staying connected with nature. And
yes.
And so what I ended up doing ultimately, though, is when I got out and started to do the job placement thing with my master's, and I was asking the question, how can I affect the most change from within the system or outside of the system, meaning from within, like a political appointee at an EPA, local or national, or outside, like with a nonprofit, protecting the environment. And I was aware that, like, you know, that feeling when you're going for something and doors don't open.
Yep. You're trying to make something happen and you're just, there's a lot of friction. Yeah. So I knew to read that by that point for what it was. And I sat back and asked my guidance, intuitively understood that, you know, the big machine isn't ready to shift yet. There's just still so much investment in fossil fuels and in the market economy, the way it's shaped around the use, let's just use that neutral word, the use of fossil fuels, that it's just not time yet. So why don't you go for change one person at a time by working with consciousness? So at that point, I shifted out of using my master's and went back into using my bachelor's in English literature and went to teach in the classroom, while having picked up other energy medicine modalities, running energy medicine sessions alongside as a second revenue stream. I love this. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the coolest turning points rather, in the plot line here is I'm now in the public school system for 2.5 years, and I'm teaching meditation to kids now. I have an after school club I developed with a male colleague of mine, for mostly boys who were attention deficit disorder labeled kids, and teaching them meditation, playing with them with Qigong, because I was already doing some Qigong at that time.
Oh my goodness.
And it was really fun too, because I actually relied on something I learned as a girl. Christine, it's funny because this doesn't usually come out in interviews. I was actually showing the boys how to interact with the trees and have their field, how the trees field respond to them. And they were hooked at that point.
Beautiful. Oh my goodness.
It was really fun to show them like more of what existed them beyond their mind and their thoughts and the way that they were getting labeled. And so, it was a wow. Thank you for that. Wow. So I had already been traveling overseas quite a few times. I was 17 and a senior in high school, and I was an exchange student down in Venezuela. And that started my love of international travel. So I haven't mentioned that yet, but I always had the sense of adventure and fun, and you know, life is meant to be lived, and planes are meant to be jumped out of, as well as wanting to get to destinations. And
All right.
I love playing and tromping around the planet. So I was 2.5 years in with this teacher's degree, running the energy medicine and holistic health and wellness sessions on the side. And two things converged at this time. One of them was I had my hands over the solar plexus and sacral of a client. And she was like in her third of a package of 10 sessions. And she was really getting great results. There was no complaints. It was just all joy and excitement about what was coming. Yet I sat there in my nature. I said, okay, how can I get even more robust results for my clients? And asking my higher self and guidance in the universe. And then right around that same time on a Saturday morning, pre-digital banking, I was balancing my checkbook and wasn't pleased with what I saw. Here I was with a master's. I only had basic needs, like a basic Ford Escort or basic housing. Yes, I wanted organic food. And yes, I wanted a massage per week because I consider those both preventative health 101. But other than that, I wasn't there was no luxury items I was buying. And I wasn't having an easy time making ends meet. And I was feeling caged. Like, oh my God, is this my life for the next 3-4 decades? No, not acceptable. How does it get any better than this, universe? What else is possible here? So those two aspects converge, the tightness that I wasn't appreciating and then wanting to get more robust results from my clients. And so within a month's time, probably like 2 weeks, I got introduced to the international school system from a colleague of mine. And I did what had to be done to attend the convention that year, and all the heads of different schools from all over the world flew in, and we all had our interviews in hotel rooms throughout the hotel. So like I'd be interviewing like in the Middle East in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd be in Central America, and then later on in the afternoon I'd be in Asia.
I love it.
So it was fun. It was a whirlwind. And so I chose to go with the job offer from the Far East, from where I sit, is the Far East, to Taiwan, the democratic island nation of where the traditional Chinese practices can be practiced.
Okay.
Persecution. So I became an administrator and a department chair there as well, and continued the energy medicine and holistic health and wellness sessions outside and alongside my classroom teaching and administration career for local Chinese and expats.
Wow.
And taught meditation to the students, especially the kids, because there were varying degrees of westernized or Taiwanesified, traditional Taiwanese, depending on when their parents came back with them from the States. So they were all tracked to go back to the States for college, the Ivy Leagues, most of them. And so I particularly remember while I taught, I created a course called Global Psychology, bringing in the Dalai Lama's text when he met with Western psychologists and scientists every other year. And then also I then taught AP Psych using, typical Western 101 psych for the colleges use. But prior to that, I was also teaching meditation to my students. I was kind of sliding it in there first as a club after school. But then I started to use it with the juniors who were getting ready to apply for college, and the seniors who were in their application process. And so many of them are like, my God, Miss Kay, if you hadn't taught me how to meditate, I don't know how I would have gotten through this process.
Sure.
So it was fun to see that appreciation. So yeah, I evolved reviewing different stuff from the Western psychology background I had now with the mind, understanding consciousness and energy medicine and the chakras and Qigong. I became a Qigong teacher. I also flew to India and became a yoga teacher, formally trained in India, as well as the meditation teacher certification, but I had already been teaching meditation. So I also, like, every Sunday I'd go and get reflexology and Tuina, traditional Chinese massage, and I'd sit there and ask them with the chart that was in front of me, Chinese, with my whatever Chinese I had at that point. I'd ask them, like, what did this mean? What did that mean? And so I was learning about energy flows. And then I would travel to monasteries, and where I ran a lot of the time, I would run behind this monastery. There was this beautiful path behind one of the monasteries close by to where I lived. And I would end up talking to the monks. I'd walk around the monasteries around the island and learn. I was fascinated to find that there's more study rooms than there were like a main chanting room or meditation room. So meaning there was more dialogue going on in the monasteries about the teachings and about meditation practice than there was like a place to meditate or chant. That was fascinating to me. So I was just increasing my learning curve. I would travel in between the semesters during Chinese New Year. Instead of coming back to the West, I would go throughout Southeast Asia. A lot of the time I'd end up in Thailand on an island called Koh Samui because it was in a vortex in the Gulf of Thailand. But I would be learning, and I'd go to Buddhist monasteries there, and I'd talk to them about the holistic practices, and I'd get them. Like, I got my first coffee enema. I got all sorts of kinds of clearing and purging done on my body while I was there, while asking ridiculous amounts of questions and gearing my vacations towards this kind of holistic health and wellness and my weekends. So I put it together myself.
I love it.
Returning back to the States eventually in 2010. Like, I remember when I would go around Asia, like I'd be in Bangkok and there'd be a monk and they have the bright orange robes in Thailand. And he had a cell phone in one hand and a cigarette in the other hand. And I was like, holy cow, wow, okay, that happened.
Wow.
And then I was in Taiwan, my daily life, and I'd be driving on my scooter in the morning to get my fresh produce and veggies. And I'd see a monk. Some of them have gray robes there. And that monk would be in full monk garb, getting on their scooter, driving away with their veggies and produce. And I'd be like, okay, so they do that. Because I'd see that. And then when I gas up, like in front of that specific monastery where I would run on the trails that I mentioned, I would run on the trails behind and visit, right in front of that monastery as a part of it, which was behind a gas station that I would gas my scooter up in, was like this, I would say at least, but 7 to 10 story high Guan Yin statue. And so there's Buddha statues everywhere that are just gargantuan. There's, especially in Taiwan, Guan Yin statues of all sizes everywhere. And so just this constant reminder, what that function for me was like, work within, go within. That's where your power is. So with my eyes, already having taught meditation, already having the energy medicine sessions, a part of who I was and am, I viewed that as, wow, we just have no sense in the West of the power available and accessible to us in the reduction of unnecessary strife and struggle and suffering if we would only go within.
Yes.
So I came back to the States with that understanding that we would be thrive. So it was like kind of the answer to my question as a psych major back in my bachelor's program, my first major, like how do we become the most happy, thriving version of ourselves? And I've been sharing that ever since.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. Just beautiful, organic, unfolding evolution.
Thanks.
It all unfolded exactly how it needed to. Just you again listening to your intuition. I love the fact that the running theme is to really kind of, it's all about that interconnectedness that I think you were always looking to bring together. Whether that was the internal environment, the external environment. Yeah, the learning, the knowing, the intuiting. I love just the fact that everything always seemed to kind of, really come from your most authentic self in that regard. So beautiful, so beautiful.
Yeah, I don't really know how to live inauthentically because I'd be lying to myself in some way, and I don't know how to do that. I tried it like once or twice, not listening to my guidance, like in my late teens, and so much bullshit ensued. I was like, okay, that's not worth it.
Well, that's a really early lesson to learn. So you're very blessed to have learned that. But I can see, so coming back from your travels, specifically your I guess almost a decade pretty much in Asia, the knowing, and the perspective that you wanted to share with, that really is, health. Well-being is an inside job, and we need tools and practices to help navigate that internal journey, right? Sorely lacking, but slowly growing more and more, thankfully. Yep. Thankfully. So what types of challenges I'd love for you to share, because you have all these wonderful skill sets and the interconnectedness of all of them in helping people get to the root cause, which is what we like to talk about on this show. So what types of health challenges have you had success with? Maybe you want to share an example of a client success story that came to you.
Well, one's fresh off the mind, and then I just had a report. I just came off of another interview, and prior to that, I was with a person coming out of my signature program, Magic, Manifestation, and Money Flow. And I invite about a third of the people into my mastermind. And that's where they get trained in vibrational upgrade system to become vibrational upgrade practitioners. Okay. So I was on a call with her. And she was telling me how excited she is to have found somebody who can teach her, who understands herself uniquely and sees her and wants to help take what I understand as the suffering she went through in her youth because of her own inherent powers, that is actually being allowed from working with me to come forward now to live from her powers rather than the traumas that happen because people trying to control that freedom and that light that she has. And so there is a success story in and of itself at a level of non-physicalized challenges. But she had just commented between hanging up with her and woofing down my protein drink before the interview, I checked in on my free Facebook group, Vibrational Upgrade, and in it, the woman I'm talking about had just responded to another client of mine who went through magic manifestation and money flow. And as she came out of it, it's a 3-month program. And as she came out of it, she was noticing something on her breast. And she went to the doctors and ultimately became a question of breast cancer. I stayed tracking with her through the diagnosis, and I gave her, she paid for a one-on-one. I don't normally do one-on-ones anymore. Never really have. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, the news that came in today was, Alison, you were right. There was nothing going on in my other breast. It was only where they surgically removed what had already been identified. So the bottom line was, as she was going through this process, she was in there posting, talking about, like, I'm doing my best to hold off all of the fear-based thinking that's getting projected at me from the doctor's office and what it means with a cancer diagnosis and all of the stuff around the radiation and the cancer. And I'm knowing that I can move through this, and I'm holding on to knowing that this is just coming up from all the old that I purged and working with you, Dr. Alison, in a contained, controlled way. Okay. And now it just gets surgically removed, this little lump. And it did. And that's what happened ultimately. And so, beautiful. Christine and everyone, I used to work with, health issues a lot more because I could. And like by 2014, being back in the States for about 4 years, I was like, this is heavy, man. I had to go, because if you look at matter, like you look at a cyst or a lump or chronic back pain, a chronic blockage, the way I understand energy to be is, once something has become physicalized, it takes a lot more subtle energy to break down something physicalized. Mm-hmm. So if I can get to it when it's only at a mental level, or it's at an emotional level or a spiritual level, then it takes much less clearings and pounding of energy medicine, frankly. Sure. Because subtle energy, while it works well with like the central nervous system, and it works really well with the hormonal system, and it works really well with beliefs and spiritual crises or spiritual growth and spiritual development, and emotional cloggage or emotional mayhem. When something becomes physicalized, it's almost like the person's let it go for too long in those other realms. So it has no choice, because the person hasn't been listening. Yes. To then physicalize, to cause the person to listen. Yes. And I see us coming out, and I'm a huge proponent for us coming out of those days when it's needed, where people are so checked out from the internal and the focus is so physical and external that will no longer be needed. A physical crisis, like even a crisis of like bankruptcy, or a crisis of job loss, or a crisis of divorce, or a crisis of some nature. I see so many, Christine, maybe you can illuminate me with this, because my mind has never been the same since Asia. I've never become full. I have had the worst culture shock of my life was returning to the States. Wow. None of the other, I lived in Istanbul. I was a teacher and administrator there too, in between Taiwan for 6 months. And my mom got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And so I resigned from that position and came back and actually used my energy medicine on her brain tumor and got it wiped off of her brain. Amazing. And then I returned to Taiwan once she was stabilized. So maybe you can help me with this, because I find that like the crisis, like even COVID, like I have been talking about us going through a cleansing process and a purging process as the old paradigm breaks down from 2012. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, in the 20-year window, 2012 to 2032. And so I understand that now we're more we just came into the building stage of the new paradigm. But like this idea of just going along with things until they get so out of control, you have to address it. Right. I don't understand that mentality. And I feel like COVID was needed and lasted so long because there are so many people who are that lazy. Oh, there are so many lessons in the paradigm that you're talking about. I love this. Yeah. So absolutely, we can use words like root cause. We can use, the words, somatization is the one that I think you're talking about. When by the time everything gets somatized, you're dealing with a much denser situation.
and therefore the work that, is you're a little bit behind the 8 ball. Now, that being said, everything's, in an evolution. But I think what I celebrate is your passion for having people understand that it's like I say on the show all the time, that you're so much more powerful than you've been led to believe. That when it comes to the health of this organism, that when we work with at the subtle level, we work with the mental, we work with the emotional, the spiritual, right? We have so much more capacity available before things get to crisis mode. And so I love that. And I think we're learning. I think there's more and more integration and acceptance in the last 10 years. I think there's been an accelerated acceptance around that. And even, your path, right? You came through psychology initially anyway, right? Very interesting, because I find that people end up in the holistic health field, either through, you can come in so many different ways these days. You can come in through psychology, you can come in through spiritual practice and spiritual teaching, right? But you can even come now through neurology and neuroscience, and I think that overall is what it's saying, is like, there are all these pathways into understanding what's really going on, how the design and just how this incredible organism works. I mean, you can't be in this work and not be passionate about the intersection of what's going on in the mind and the body and the emotions and all of it, right? I mean, this is what we're it's the whole intersection. It's just fascinating.
Look at you. You guys can't, but we're doing videos. It's really fun. It's your body language. It's so fascinating. It's fascinating.
Yes, it's fascinating. It is fascinating.
Totally.
So looking for better ways to take care of ourselves is really what I think, this gets to is, okay, so if we know that we can get ahead of the game, right? If we can understand what sign and symptom are. But first of all, I guess let me back it up. You brought up, how do we get people to turn their awareness inside? How do we get people to pay attention and really deeply listen, right? So if you could share with us, talk to us about that. What are some guidance? What are some tips? Not everybody's going to sit and chant Om for 20 minutes a day, right? But they don't need to. So I would love for you to share, because you have very grounded practices, in the work that you do. So how can we get people to listen? Because that's really the beginning of taking control of their health.
Okay, so I'm going to go beyond health, and I'm going to go into, if you look at the story that emerged out of my mouth to you today, Christine, in a way that's different than on any other interview, my background, my story.
Yes.
You could hear the theme in there too of having fun and living up to my fullest potential, celebrating being in my body, celebrating being on planet Earth, celebrating all the fun that can be had, all the adventure that can be had. So my understanding is, I want to answer your question approached from this way. The brain, the mind, the different levels of consciousness that we have at our conscious mind level, the thoughts that we hear. So if we do have a meditation practice and we're looking at our thoughts, creating increasing detachment and increasingly strengthening the observer through our practice, that is the conscious mind. And those are the thoughts only that we hear. And that's at most 15% of where we make our daily choices from.
Yes.
85%. I think it's more than this, from working with the tens of thousands of people I have at this point.
It's like much higher, I think.
Yeah, I look at it as at least 90.
You're right.
That's generous.
Yes.
They're coming from the unconscious and subconscious. So I always give the example of, like, if you're driving a car, when you're learning to drive, you say, put the car in reverse, put the car in drive, put the foot on brake, put the foot on gas. You say that out loud when you're learning, but none of us do it anymore now that we've mastered it. So that's back in the subconscious and unconscious. Mm-hmm. So in that area, there's traumas at the subconscious level. At the unconscious level, it's conditioning, it's family imprints, it's beliefs. Like maybe that when it comes to my own growth, I don't know best. Or when it comes to my own body, I don't know best.
That's right.
And so that will cause you to look outside yourself, not for somebody like me who can support and guide you and reattune you to your own knowing.
Right.
Get your back with my own knowing until they're there. But surrender your authority, surrender your knowing, and go to an external authority figure who will tell you what's going on and will tell you what to do. If you think back to the cancer example of the client who purged through it. So if the nature of the ego mind, the nature of our mind is designed to keep us protected, it doesn't like the new, because then it has more work to do. So the basic wiring of fight or flight, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, as you're in the jungle, that's still our wiring. We still have the adrenal cortex wired, and it still has the stress response, but it's in a very different context than wild jungles for the majority of us now. Why I'm saying that, though, is the ego, therefore the structure of this ego mind that we do hear the thoughts of, its nature has been given to us to not only keep us safe in navigating the physical plane, but also our physical five senses have limits put on them, so we don't perceive all that's going on in the multidimensional realms or beyond the physical, metaphysical realms, because there's just so much that's actually going on. We go crazy keeping track of all of it.
Yes.
So if the nature of this structure of the ego mind, whose thoughts we are the ones that we actually hear, the front of the mind, conscious mind, is to keep us safe and protected against the unknown, it is inherently resistant to change.
Yes.
It's inherently protective of the new, which means when we have a new sensation coming into our five physical senses, I use this example a lot, like when I'm in Asia and I see at a fruit stand an exotic fruit new to me. I don't know what to call it. My mind goes, okay, looks like something I already know. It has to go through its data based on my visual sense, picking up something, goes through its files to label it, finds pear, because it's the closest to what it already knows. And because I'm in Asia, it then concludes Asian pear. So if that's the nature of our machinery, that means that all of this back of the house consciousness, as I've come to call the sub and unconscious, that isn't worked with, rather than the front of the head, literally that's where it's located, the conscious mind, the moral regulator, so to speak, which is the last part of our brain to develop as teens, which is always a fun trip, because our reactive emotional limbic system developed way before that.
Yes.
The moral regulator does. So if all this back of the house consciousness we're choosing an average of, as we agreed upon, more like 90% of our daily choices, then that means all we're doing is perpetuating the past. So vibrational upgrade system, the way I've designed it is to get at that back of the house consciousness, no matter its source, to release it from its blockage, so that not only do you have more fresh, vital life force energy at the front of the conscious mind to access and have more presence and more mindfulness and more capacity to choose something new, the other half of the vibrational upgrade system I've created takes then mindfulness in an applied way, not in I'm so mindful as I eat my peach and I have presence as the juice drips down my chin, but in a more advanced application of mindfulness where, okay, so now you have this freed up. The block is no longer there. Now you have more consciousness at your disposal. So you have more presence in the moment to make new choices. So with the neurological redirect and the creation of new neurological pathways and the making of new choices, therefore we're going to create a new behavioral pattern.
Right.
I also have certification as a behavioral change specialist. So I combine the energy medicine component of the clearing out the back of the house consciousness along with the applied mindfulness component to engage in new behaviors and have new choices available and create a new life. But all of that is based on let's live up to our potential. Let's get all that latent potential, that 90% of what we're not using except using it against ourselves.
Right.
Let's flip that and flush our systems with it. So not only is it everything I already described, but you talked about somatization or the somatic body. I, as a personal trainer and yoga teacher, I very much approach the body, and I do it through the chakra column because it is the single most reliable diagnostic tool once you understand the chakras as a roadmap to what's going on, because every chakra covers a major domain of life, right? And so if I have certain beliefs about, let's say that I was born into a family and I didn't feel accepted. I felt like a black sheep, because that's common for a lot of people who listen to holistic.
That's right. Yes.
Shows, yeah. So I'm different. I'm black sheep. I don't fit in, or they're still in the spiritual closet and haven't yet found it acceptable to come out.
That's right.
So there's in the root, there's going to be a sense of rejection. And so you're going to carry that around in the root chakra. The root chakra also relates to your ability to be embodied. It relates to your vitality levels. It relates to your immunity levels. It relates to your spine. It relates, it covers your legs all the way down to the tips of your toes. So your feet as well, and your ankles. And it covers somewhat money. It covers feeling like you don't fit in, feeling like you don't belong, obviously, because that's where its root is in the dysfunction of the blockage. Mm-hmm. So if I clear that out, that means I'm also going to be clearing out the lower reproductive glands, mm-hmm. because every chakra is related to a major endocrine gland. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the biggest gathering of nerve ganglia that have the neuroreceptors receiving messaging from the brain gathered along the spine at each of the chakras. So that means that I'm also going to be improving my central nervous system's functioning and messaging. So there's then also in that area, you're likely to have less tight glutes. Or let's say that you have had a foot problem. You're likely, because the chakra as wheel, which is what chakra means, is turning out more of that vital life force energy or chi or prana in the region it's responsible for, which is tailbone down to toes. Then that means where there's been chronic blockage, the tissues or musculature has been tight, as the vital life force energy is more able to get to it. Yeah, there might be a sense of blockage, as a sense of pain, as the blockage is now having, for the first time in a long time, if ever, fresh vital life force energy hitting it to break open that chronic blockage, so more energy flows throughout that musculature and tissue. So it's affecting your body too. So when I say it's the back of the head consciousness, it also corresponds to all over the body.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so vibrational upgrade energy medicine. This is your system. So many components of it, working with the chakra as the roadmap, the roadmap to consciousness, to, sort of mind, body, everything going on.
Yep.
And then, but I love the way that you frame that, this unused capacity. I've never quite heard that frame before. I've heard kind of in the negative, we only use, 5% of our conscious mind and everything else is subconscious. Therefore, we're become habitual creatures and it's really hard to change, right? But I love the frame that you start with, which is that's your potential. You have 90 to 95% unused, literally unused energy, untapped energy to create a life of your dreams, essentially, right? To create everything that you really deeply desire. I love that. So that's just the first thing that's coming at me, is that I've never really heard it that way before. It's that one of your books, I can't remember which book because you've written so many, but the first one is there something, what if there's nothing wrong, right? Yeah, that was the title of that. Yeah. And I think that goes a little bit to that is, so when we have pain and we have suffering, we have emotional blockages, these are actually opportunities in your system to really look at that. I wrote
about this today.
Okay.
Yeah, so what if, it's coming back to what I asked you before, like, why is it that people seem to require some kind of limitation or crisis or suffering in order to work with themselves internally, and then even possibly get to the understanding that there's more potential there, depending on who they're working with, because somebody might never go there. Typically, they'll just help solve the problem. I want to actually hold on a second and go back to what if there's nothing wrong, because you mentioned neurological approaches and neuroscience, understanding this. And I wrote, that's what I created Global Psychology, the course based on, was what actually in the Dalai Lama's meetings with Western scientists, neuroscientists, psychologists, that's actually where it emerged from, the measurement. Like, I don't know if you ever saw the picture of the monk with the electrodes on its head.
Yeah.
That emerged from the Dalai Lama's biannual summits that I use his text basing my global psychology course on.
Okay.
So there was a professor out of UC San Diego and a professor out of University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so they conducted the tests there to test the effects of meditation on the brainwave state. So that's where it starts. So and then I know that while I was working with my mom's brain tumor, I was actually programming, I was asking the cells around, the non-damaged cells that sat around the damaged cells where the brain tumor had sat, I asked them to adopt the tasks of the damaged brain cells. I somehow intuitively knew with the programming that I could do with a heart-based Tibetan energy medicine modality, I learned to command this at a cellular level, what to have happen. And that's what I did. And this is before they came out with neuroplasticity.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So in What If There's Nothing Wrong, I'm talking about some of these groundbreaking things, but that I discovered myself before and without relying on science. I loved the scientific measurement and validation of it.
Sure.
But I also appreciate, from seeing all the people I've worked with through the years, how much I just trust my intuition and know it's a trustable voice, and how many people tell me it's a trustable voice and reflect me. You were right, Dr. Alison, about such and such. I wouldn't be out here doing this work. One, if it didn't work, and two, if the intuition wasn't proven reliable, because then I'd be hurting people. So I love you're really bringing to my consciousness today, and I think it was already happening as well. But you're so perfectly timed and helping me just appreciate at a higher level, like some of the basics that I still, because I'm operating at the level I'm operating at, that I don't necessarily acknowledge anymore, but just that basic learning of relying on your own intuition. I mean, if you read What If There's Nothing Wrong, my first book, you get the text of the mind-body connection, and that's what we were talking about. But then when you go into the second book and the third book, and even the fourth, which is the most advanced, they're all talking about more and more increasingly the spiritual development and the spiritual path and the metaphysical. And part of that, frankly, is because the marketing on Facebook and marketing in the West, it doesn't even know how to respond to me. You know, like I had a fight with Hay House to be labeled as New Thought instead of New Age. You talk about how I'm talking about potential. Yeah, people used to go into energy healing or energy, and I don't ever call it energy healing, but people used to using this field to solve a problem that Western medicine hasn't solved, rather than going to it. Yeah.
Yes.
Rather than going to it as a means to open up to your entire potential. I mean, what do you think the yoga path is?
Exactly. Yes. No, thank you. And again, that's the big paradigm change, that you noticed when you came here. And again, it's certainly taking, root more and more. There is an evolutionary system at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is an intelligent system at work. And our job, I think more and more, is to find just, these tools, these, practices essentially to connect with that intelligence, because it's always coming through. This is the other thing you talked about, intuition. What is intuition in your own words?
All right. So let me speak to what you just said, because one of the things that I teach my vibrational upgrade practitioners when they're first learning about how to work with channeling energy, when I say channeling, I mean bring it through their body, how to connect with it, how to contact it, how to bring more of it down and onto somebody else for their behalf or their own behalf, that it has a divine intelligence, the nature of light, the nature of energy, the nature of chi or prana or life force or ki has a divine intelligence of its own. So thankfully, it's not up to me, so that when somebody is laying on a table in front of me as a client, I'm not, which I don't do a lot of nowadays. So when somebody comes in on my group program and I'm listening to them, I'm not having to, when I'm flowing energy to them, I'm not having to decide what gets priority, because if I've seen this so many times, they'll come to me with, let's say, chronic back pain, and yet the light will go to the knees and they'll be like, oh my God, in the midst of a session, my knees are on fire. What's happening? And I'll understand it to be, that's where the light decided to go to boost your back, because that's the first place that needs the boosting, because it took the most from your chronic back pain. Your knees have been used more. Right? So this light has an intelligence of its own, and you can surrender to it. And it's in the end of my second book, I was actually approaching a yoga guru, because I was coming out of doing so many one-on-ones, wanting to understand, hey, I have become more spacey. I don't feel as grounded as I normally do. Hey, what are the effects of channeling this much prana or life force or chi day in and day out for other people? And I went to him to find out that answer. And in the end of the second book of mine, Vibrational Upgrade, A Conspiracy for Your Bliss, Easing Humanity's Evolutionary Transition, it was me in a discussion with this yoga guru, one of the main ones who brought yoga from the East to America, saying, hey, Gurudev, is it accurate to say that life force, prana, is the same thing as saying soul force? He smiled at me, nodding. And is it even appropriate to say unconditional love? And he smiled at me, nodding. So if you go back to my story as a child, connecting in with nature all around me, I sensed it then.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you ask what is the definition of intuition, it's being able to yield to that higher intelligence.
Beautiful. Energy work really is, it's like facilitation work. Helping people, find the flow. You keep talking about, unblocking, reaching back here, going behind the head here, and opening up so that things can come through, in better harmony, in better balance. So it's beautiful. So this goes to heart, and we got to wrap up here because I could talk to you for a very long time.
I can do part two. A lot of hosts asked me to come back on.
Yeah, I think we might have to do that. I'm going to ask you, what inspires you about this unique time we're living in?
Well, you yourself have been saying it repeatedly. You repeated it probably 3 times, and you said, yeah, but it's changing. But it's growing. And so I know that somewhere around, Christine and listeners, 2019, I was aware that all that I had been voicing since coming back to the States from 2010 on had begun, and I wasn't the only one. There are other new thought leaders out there also speaking to it, had hit threshold. This is way pre-COVID. And so I was aware that, okay, cool. Now what? If people are aware of the law of attraction and they have a sense of there's something bigger than just their thoughts and their minds going on, excellent. What's the next stage in evolution?
Yes.
So what I have heard from people talking to me, my clients and students responding to me, is I've given them the how.
Yes.
Like you hear these pithy sayings, like stay focused on your desire. Great. How do you do that?
How do I practice? Mm-hmm.
So between the clearings and activations of the energy medicine half of Vibrational Upgrade System, then there's the applied mindfulness of how do I learn how to use my power of choice?
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay. And so is there something that our listeners, special way for them to connect with you? Is there anything you're working on right now you'd like to share so they can get a taste of the vibrational upgrade energy system you've developed?
So Vibrational Upgrade System has a really good taster that I want to extend to you guys. And there's two different ways we can approach it. I'm going to give you the free way first.
Okay. The easy way. Yes.
Yeah. If you go to the Dragon Master Creatrix.com, that's the name of my latest book, Dragon Master Creatrix. If you need to, look at my name and look up my books on Amazon, and it's the most recent release, and then put that in a URL.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. Yes.
Thank you. So it's a hidden page on my website, but if you buy the Dragon Master Creatrix, so it's not totally for free, you buy my book, you get my book, and you then give your receipt info into the page there. My team will give you a month of Activate Your Magic for free.
Okay.
So what that includes is at the new moon and full moon times, I'm doing a half an hour-ish recording of sacred clearings and activations after having done research from professional astrologers on what's going on, then running appropriate clearings and activations to help your system cue in and take even more advantage of those alignments.
Beautiful.
There's two. Thank you. Yeah, it is really my favorite part. It's a lot of output for me, and it's only $97 a month. So if you want to just go to activateyourmagic.com and just get in now, you'll get access to what I've already done this month, including last week's Zoom event, which was for the eclipse.
Yes.
And the full moon, supermoon lunar eclipse on Tuesday, the clearings. Then I do two more live events. One is an hour-long clearings and activations call where you're all on the call and I'm perceiving what's in the field and what's in your consciousnesses, and I'm running clearings and activations. You're all on mute, and I'm just dumping an hour long of clearings and activations on you. And then there's a fourth event, which is that live Zoom event with me, where there is a bit of interaction, and I'm doing more clearings and activations on you. So it's 4 different deliverables you get in activateyourmagic.com. It's more than getting your feet wet. You can sample what it's like to have. I highly recommend it, which is why, in great part, this is a free offer if you buy the Dragon Master Creatrix rather than. Or if you want to just dive in, go and pay $97 and enter it. It's my mastermind, my most advanced people are receiving this as a part of their mastermind program. So it's not beginnerish. It will give you a sense of lightness, increased lightness. It'll give you a sense of living from beyond your current mindset and what else is possible. Mm-hmm. So it'll do more than dipping your toe in the deep end. That's what I would love to extend to your listeners.
That is awesome. Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Alison. There's a lot there. I can't wait for our listeners to dive in. I'll make sure to include all the links and information. So thank you again. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you for the work you're doing in the world.
Well, thank you for having me and the work you're doing in the world. It's really great what you're helping people see and perceive. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Namaste.